Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going to be taking a look at Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit. So this book, it basically says that all those small actions we barely notice, those are the habits. They really shape who we are.
Yeah. What I thought was super interesting is, he uses all this hard science, but then he also brings in all these stories that are super easy to relate to.
Right.
He shows us what's going on in our brains when we're creating, these routines. And then he's like, hey, we can use that same science to change anything.
Okay, so this habit loop thing.
Yes.
Can you break that down for us a little bit more?
Oh, absolutely.
I know there's three parts, the cue, the routine, and then the reward. But what does that actually look like in real life?
Yeah. Okay, so let's imagine you wake up in the morning and you're super groggy. That's your cue.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, I need coffee. So you stumble to the coffee maker, kind of like a zombie. That's your routine.
Yeah.
And then that sweet, sweet energy boost you get, that's your reward.
Oh, man, I can relate to that one for sure.
Yeah.
So every time I do that, it gets a little bit easier.
Exactly. Yeah, every time you run that loop, that connection, it gets stronger in your brain.
Yeah.
So you can picture it like, you're forging a trail through a forest.
Yeah.
At first, you're pushing through branches. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
But the more you walk it, that path becomes clearer and clearer, and then eventually it's effortless. And that's basically what our brains are doing with habits. They're trying to conserve energy, so they're like, let's just make this automatic.
So that's kind of freaky when you think about how Duhigg says that almost 40% of what we do every day is habitual.
Yeah.
We're basically on autopilot for half our lives.
It's wild, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It makes you really wonder, what am I doing that's a habit that I don't even realize?
Yeah.
Maybe not the best habit.
Exactly. And that's why I think understanding this habit loop is so important.
Yeah.
Because if we're not really paying attention, we can get stuck in these patterns that really don't help us.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is once we see, those cues and those rewards that are driving those habits, we can actually rewrite the script.
Okay, so let's get nerdy for a minute here and talk about the brain science behind this. So Duhigg talks about the basal ganglia. Is that the brain's habit headquarters?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, it's where all those automatic patterns get stored. Think about when you drive to work.
Right.
A lot of people, it's so routine, you're barely even thinking about it. Your basal ganglia has taken all these actions, the turning the key and adjusting your mirrors, navigating traffic, and it's just turned it into this smooth, effortless routine. But there's more to it than just the basal ganglia.
Okay, here's where it gets interesting. Tell me more.
All right, so this is where dopamine comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So dopamine is this neurotransmitter, and it's really associated with pleasure and reward. So when you get that hit of caffeine or you feel satisfied after finishing a task, your brain is releasing dopamine. And that dopamine rush, it's strengthening the connection between the cue, the routine, and the reward. So it's solidifying that habit loop even more.
So it's a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
We do the thing, we get a little dopamine reward, and then we're like, I want to do that again.
Exactly.
But what if it's a habit we don't want to do again? How do we stop doing it?
Right. That's the real magic that Duhigg shares in this book, is he says it's not really about willpower or, just stopping cold turkey. It's about realizing that habit loop, it's kind of hardwired into us, so we have to work with it, not against it.
So we can't just erase a habit, we need to replace it.
Yeah, basically. You keep the cue and the reward the same, but you find a new routine that gives you a similar payoff. Let's say you bite your nails when you're stressed. So the cue is the routine is biting your nails, and the reward is that feeling of relief or distraction that you get.
So instead of trying to just stop being stressed, which probably isn't going to happen, or, denying myself that little bit of relief I need to find a new routine.
Exactly. So instead of biting your nails, you could try squeezing a stress ball or practicing some deep breaths. So you're still addressing that stress. You're still getting that release, but you're doing it in a healthier way.
Right.
And the more you practice that new routine, the stronger that connection in your brain becomes.
So Duhigg calls that the golden rule of habit change. Habits can't be deleted. They can only be replaced. And he uses that great example with Starbucks.
Oh, yeah. Love that one.
Right. You think they're just selling coffee, but they've really figured out how to create a habit. Your morning commute, that might be your cue. Stopping at Starbucks is your routine. And the reward is that feeling of satisfaction. Maybe it's the caffeine, maybe it's the friendly barista, or maybe it's both.
It's the whole experience.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's not just the coffee. They've created this whole routine that people crave even before they take that first sip.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really powerful because, Duhigg argues that habits, they don't just shape us individually.
Hmm.
They shape organizations, communities, even like entire cultures. And he tells this really cool story about Paul O'Neill, who was the former CEO of Alcoa, which is an aluminum company.
Okay.
And when O'Neill came in, he made safety his like top priority, even though like a lot of people thought that was kind of strange.
Wait, safety? That doesn't sound like the most exciting goal for an aluminum company.
Right, you would think that. But O'Neill was convinced that if he could change the company's habits around safety, he could actually boost productivity too.
Okay, that does sound kind of counterintuitive, but tell me it worked.
It did. It totally worked.
Yeah.
So by focusing on changing the routines around safety, O'Neill created this ripple effect throughout the whole organization. It wasn't just about like hard hats and rules. It was about empowering every employee to spot problems and solve them.
So changing one seemingly small habit, like prioritizing safety, actually changed the entire company culture.
Yeah.
And it's bottom line. That's incredible.
And it shows that even these like really ingrained habits, even in these huge companies, can be shifted with the right approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about understanding that habit loop,
Yeah.
and then finding ways to use it to make positive change. But it's not just about the mechanics.
There's more. Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
There's also this whole other layer about belief,
Yeah.
Like Duhigg really emphasizes that believing you can change is like super important.
Okay.
He uses the example of people who like successfully quit smoking.
Right.
Like the ones who actually believe they can quit and have support are way more likely to actually do it.
Okay, so it's not just knowing the steps you have to take. It's like believing you can actually take those steps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But it also feels a little bit fuzzy, like how do you even measure belief?
Yeah, it is tricky.
Wow.
But Duhigg kind of connects belief to this idea of community.
Okay.
So he says that like having a support system is actually crucial for making habits stick. When you're trying to like make a big change.
Yeah.
Having people around you that believe in you and support your goals can like make all the difference.
Yeah, it's like having your own personal cheering section.
Totally.
Pushing you forward.
Exactly. And Duhigg takes this idea even further and applies it to like organizations.
Oh, wow.
He argues that companies can actually like create cultures that encourage habit change
Okay.
by building this sense of like shared purpose and collective belief. It's pretty fascinating.
So it's not just about individual willpower. It's about creating an environment where positive change is just like the normal thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really helpful way to think about it for like anyone trying to make a change,
Right.
whether it's personal or professional. But what if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed and you don't even know where to start?
Right. Well, that's where these keystone habits come in.
Keystone habits.
Yeah. So these are the habits that have like this ripple effect.
Okay.
They kind of set off these positive changes in other areas of your life.
Oh, interesting.
They're like the foundation for building other good habits.
Okay, tell me more about these keystone habits. I gotta know.
All right. So Duhigg uses this example of making your bed every morning.
Okay, something simple.
That sounds super simple, right?
Yeah.
But he argues that it can actually have this huge impact on your like overall well-being and productivity.
Really?
It's about creating a sense of order and control in your environment.
Okay, I guess I can see that. Like, even if it's something small, like just making my bed,
Yeah,
it could give you a sense of accomplishment that could carry into the rest of your day.
exactly. And what's really helpful is Duhigg actually gives us a framework for finding our own keystone habits.
Oh, perfect.
He says to look for habits that like significantly impact your willpower, your self-control, or your overall sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
Because those are often the habits that can trigger positive changes in other areas of your life.
So it's like finding the lever that can move the most weight.
Yeah.
If you can focus on building those key habits, you'll see positive results like across the board.
Exactly. And once you've identified those keystone habits, you can apply everything we've been talking about. Understanding that habit loop and swapping out those negative routines for positive ones and cultivating that belief in your ability to change.
Right.
But changing a habit, it takes more than just understanding the science and identifying your keystones, right?
Okay, so what else do we need to consider?
Willpower. It definitely plays a role.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle that can be strengthened through practice.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Duhigg talks about these techniques like temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling.
Yeah, where you basically link something you enjoy with something you need to do, but you might not feel like doing.
So like only letting myself watch my favorite show while I'm on the treadmill.
Exactly. You got it. It's about making the habit you want to build more appealing by connecting to something you really like.
Okay.
He also talks about implementation intentions,
Okay.
which are basically specific plans about when, where, and how you're going to perform the habit.
Oh, so instead of just vaguely saying like, oh, I'll exercise more, I'll actually say I'm going to go for a run Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 a.m. in the park.
Exactly.
Having that concrete plan takes the guesswork out of it, so I'm more likely to do it.
Yeah, it's about removing any obstacles that might stop you from doing it.
Right.
But there's another fascinating part of the power of habit that Duhigg explores.
Okay.
It's not just about individuals. It's about how habits can shape entire societies and cultures.
Oh, wow. So like big picture stuff.
Yeah. Like he talks about how habits can be contagious.
Interesting.
They can spread through social networks and influence how groups behave. And he gives some really compelling examples, like the story of how a few small changes in policing strategies actually helped reduce crime rates in New York City in the 90s.
I remember hearing about that. It was like a huge turnaround.
Yeah.
So how did habits play a role in that?
Well, it wasn't about adding more police officers or enacting harsher laws.
Okay.
It was about changing the habits and routines of both the police and the community.
Okay.
They started focusing on, like, seemingly minor offenses, like graffiti and fare evasion.
Okay, that seems kind of counterintuitive. Shouldn't they be focusing on the bigger crimes?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But the idea was that by addressing these smaller, broken windows, they could create an environment where larger crimes were less likely to happen.
Interesting.
It's like a really fascinating example of how understanding the power of habit can be used to address these complex social problems.
Yeah.
By identifying the habits that contribute to negative outcomes, we can start to find ways to shift those behaviors and create positive change on like a much larger scale.
So it's almost like a butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Small changes in individual habits can have these massive repercussions on a societal level.
Exactly.
Wow, that's both really exciting and a little bit intimidating. Makes you think about the responsibility we each have to choose our habits carefully.
Absolutely. And that's what makes The Power of Habit such an important book. It's not just about breaking bad habits and forming good ones.
Right.
It's about recognizing that these seemingly insignificant actions have the power to shape our lives, our communities, and our world in some really profound ways.
Yeah, it's like a call to action.
Right.
To pay attention, to be mindful, to make conscious choices about the habits we create, both individually and collectively.
Exactly. And to remember that we have the power to change things for the better, one small habit at a time.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the power of habit, I'm realizing like, wow, we really do have a lot of control over these things that shape our lives, It's kind of empowering, but also a little scary.
Yeah, I get that. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
But like we've been talking about, just understanding how these habits work, that's like the first step to taking control. And remember, Duhigg gives us this great framework.
Yeah.
Find the cue, the routine, and the reward,
Yeah.
and then figure out how to like swap out that routine while keeping the other two.
Right, that's his golden rule of habit change.
Exactly.
It seems so simple, but it like totally changes how we think about change. It's not about just forcing yourself to do something or relying on willpower. It's about understanding the science and working with our brains.
It's like, imagine you have this well-worn path in your garden.
Okay.
You've walked it for years. It's like the easiest route, but it doesn't lead where you want to go anymore. So instead of trying to avoid it completely, which is like super hard, you can just create a new path alongside it.
Oh, I see. So the more you walk that new path, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
And then eventually it becomes the new default, the easier choice.
Yeah. You're basically doing the same thing with habits. You're just creating new pathways in your brain that become stronger over time.
Okay, so we're forging new brain paths.
Yeah. It does take effort and consistency, but Duhigg says it's not about being perfect. It's about just being persistent. Even small changes, if you do them consistently, they can lead to really big results over time.
And he talks about small wins, right? Those
Yeah.
little victories that kind of keep you going. So even if you mess up, even if you fall back into old habits, it's not like a total failure. It's just a chance to learn and get back on track.
Exactly. It's all about progress, not perfection. And remember, Duhigg gives us all these tools to help make those changes stick. Like we talked about those keystone habits, the ones that have that ripple effect. Focus on those first. And don't forget about the importance of belief and support systems. Changing habits can be hard. So having people around you who believe in you can make all the difference.
And he also says to try out different rewards and see what really motivates you. It's about figuring out what works for you.
Exactly. That's why this book is so great. It's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a framework that can work for anything. Personal goals, professional success, even like societal change.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this question. What's one habit you'd like to change? Think about the cue, the routine, and the reward. What's a new routine you could try? Remember, even small changes can have big results. Start small, be consistent, and believe in yourself because you can create lasting change. And who knows, maybe your new habits will inspire others and make the world a little bit better. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring the power you have to create the life you want.